Hey everybody, welcome back to the shed. So today we're going to work on some more golf clubs, particularly this Northwestern driver. It's a fairly inexpensive driver, just a steel head, but I'm going to be assembling this for my 13-year-old son. So you can add this to his bag and start working on hitting a driver. But the first thing we need to do is we need to remove the head from this shaft because the shaft is bent. As you can see right here, this is called the hosel of the golf club head. And it is slightly bent to the right, so I'm going to show you today how to remove it safely and properly. Prep it so it can be reinstalled on a new shaft. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure we have all of the tools and materials that we need so we can make this go smoothly. So what I have here is my mixing board and mixing sticks for my epoxy that I'm going to be using. This right here is actually an extractor tool from some of my golf equipment. All I've done though is I've wrapped 100 grit sandpaper around the tip of it so that I can put it down the hosel of the golf club once I take it off the shaft to remove any type of residual epoxy that may still be in there. Utility knife, you always have a reason to have one of those around, so just have it there ready for you. Your rubber block for your vise. This is what's going to hold your golf club into your bench vise so you can remove the head safely. Your heat source, I use propane, and I always use a nozzle where I can control the heat. Makes it way easier so you're not going to set the club head ablaze and it's too hot to touch. Then of course your cleaning solvents. Once again, I'm using mineral spirits. It seems to clean up most everything you need fairly easily, and it evaporates quick and not as harmful as, like, say, acetone or some other stuff. Alright, so the first thing we need to do now after we have got all of our materials laid out and organized is we need to place our club in the vise. Okay, so we got our club now in the vise. You can see it's in the block, it's locked down in the vise. It's not going to really move too much, so it's good, stable. I did start my heat source already so that I'm able to still do this one-handed and show you how I'm going to do this. So with the flame under control, you're just going to start applying heat to the hosel of your golf club. Alright? And all you're doing is loosening that epoxy up. Don't worry about melting off that ferrule that's at the top. It's going to happen. It's made out of plastic. It happens all the time. Once you've applied some heat to your hosel, you'll see sometimes some discoloration from the paint. Very, very normal. Just go ahead and grab it, start giving it a twist. Still not loose enough yet, so we're going to do a little more heat. Put the heat directly on it, like so. Sometimes it just takes a few minutes to get it done. Just be careful when you are holding the flame this close to the hosel that you don't put your hands anywhere near that so that you don't walk away with burning your hand and you're not able to finish your golf club either. Alright, so let's try it again. A little heat to it, but not much. Still doesn't want to go. Let's tighten this down a little bit more. Oh, I need some more heat. I'm going to blast it this time. You see it bubbling? That's got to be close to coming off. Let's try it again. You're going to hold it down here. Still don't want to come off. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay, so after applying way more heat than I thought I was going to have to, the head finally came off the shaft, and it's still a little bit warm to handle without a glove on. But let me show you the shaft real quick. You can see how the tip was bent. Yeah, you're not going to hit the ball very straight with a shaft like that. So the next step would be to clean out the hosel as best as possible. As you can see, if I use the light, maybe you can still see some residue down the side there, and along the top of the hosel from the ferrule that had melted. So this is where we're going to use that right there, which is nothing more than an extracting tool with some sandpaper on it, 100 grit sandpaper. And we're just going to try to work it out a little bit the best we can. Now, you can use a drill bit if you want to, but the drill bit can cause problems if you start taking material, specifically steel or titanium, whichever your club head may be made of, out of the inside of your hosel. It'll create more of a gap in there and the shaft will not fit correctly. So let me get this club head in the vise so I can work on getting some of that, show you how to get some of that extra glue and residue out of there, because it is certainly way too hot to handle without gloves on. Okay, so what I've done here is I've actually taken the club head that we've taken off of the shaft and put it in the bench vise. You can see it's between two rubber pads that will allow me to apply a little bit of pressure to the club head without actually scratching up the club head or, breaking it. Of course, you can still break it if you put too much pressure on it with the rubber pads in there, but the rubber pads will give a little more grip, and you can work on the club. Okay, like I said, this was a little too warm to handle with my hand, so I'm going to attempt to get the sandpaper in there so I can get some of that residue out of there. See if I can get this to roll up without being on the metal piece, because it doesn't want to stay. So what I've done is rolled it up with my fingers, put it in there, and just work on getting some of that residue out of there. Like I said, you can use a drill to do this, but if it ends up being a drill that's too big, or even if it's the right size, but you start working on taking some of the material out of it, it's going to cause more problems for you as you try to install the new shaft. Alright, so that probably could use a little more work, so I'm going to pause this, work on it a little bit more, and come back to you when I'm ready to continue. You can see here that I did get the sandpaper onto the extractor, so now I'm just going to sit here and spin it, work on getting some of the extra residue out. You can see it falling out, the dust coming out of it. Should be pretty good to go. Okay, so with that being done, now temperatures, it's almost handleable. I'm going to take the shaft we're going to use. I'm going to put it into the hosel, see if it fits, see if it gets in there without any obstruction. I might need to work on it a little bit more. Oh, there it goes. Alright, that's good. So now we got it in there. Yep, that should work. So now, of course, I'm not going to install the shaft in it like this. I mean, I could, because it's just a steel shaft with no graphics on it. But I'm not going to do it like this. I'm going to show you guys how to do it the right way, how we normally would do it inside an actual workshop for a golf course or a repair center, instead of being in a shed. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so while the club head is still in the vise and you have the shaft down inside the hosel of the club head, the one thing you can do is check for depth of how far the shaft goes down into the hosel. You want the shaft tip to go down into the hosel as far as possible, so that the shaft is all the way inside the club head, and you're going to get maximum adhesion when you are using your epoxy. So with the shaft pushed as far in as I think it can go, I'm going to take something at the top of the hosel and just kind of scratch into my shaft just a little bit. Not much, just enough to cause a little bit of a scratch. And then proceed to pull it back out, and hopefully we have a good idea of how deep it has gone in. So you can see that it's gone in pretty well. Still no, I think it's right there actually. I think that's my scratch right there. We've got plenty of shaft into the hosel. So we are going to now remove the club head out of the vise. I'm going to put the shaft back into the vise and show you how to prepare the tip of a shaft so that you'll get maximum adhesion with your epoxy. Okay, now that the shaft is back into the vise and we got an idea of where I scribed the shaft lightly, so that's going to give me the depth of how far it's going into the hosel. All you really simply need is, I'm going to use 100 grit sandpaper, and all we're going to do is rough up this shaft tip up to the point where I had scribed the shaft. Okay, and all we're trying to do is rough it up a little bit so we can create a little bit of a mechanical bond with the epoxy in the inside of the hosel, and it should hold for a mighty long time. So let me go ahead and finish that up, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so this is what the prepped tip of a golf shaft looks like. So you just, like I said, you just want to take your sandpaper and rough up the tip of the shaft. Steel shafts are fairly easy to do in comparison to graphite shafts, simply because all you're doing is roughing up the actual surface, where on a graphite shaft you tend to, you're taking some of the paint off of it, you're getting into the actual graphite shaft itself, and it's very easy to ruin a graphite shaft before you even know it, and it's no good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the golf club, I'm going to put it onto the shaft, just like a test run. Yep, it works good. Just slightly above the hosel, which is fine because we're going to be using this plastic ferrule, and this plastic ferrule will allow us to just make it look like a cleaner transition from the shaft to the hosel. Okay, so I'm going to now prep the epoxy, which we're going to need to adhere the golf club head onto the shaft.